Okay, everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Headlines. This one's going to be, I don't know, we'll call it the election special or something, because that's pretty much all that's happening in the market right now, of course. As a Canadian, I kind of forgot all this was happening until I woke up one day and there was an election in the States, and that's over now behind the market. And quite often, what happens in the market is no one takes a big bet beforehand. When it's done, everybody's taking big bets. So they're trying to say, okay, the next 4 years is going to be this administration. This is what we think the sectors that are going to do well. This is the sectors we think we're going to do poorly. And they start to pump money in. And the best thing for us as retail traders is they can't do that instantly. So that's going to take a number of days, a number of weeks. You're going to get these kind of sustained trends one way or another. So I'm very excited from a trading point of view. We're already seeing some of this take place. And it's a great time, I think, to be a trader because we just got to figure out where the institutions are going to dump their money and we just got to follow along with. So, Steve, I didn't check. Hold on. Let me check uranium before I ask Steve how he's doing. I always check see how uranium's doing.
Not much.
URA, not much. Hasn't really moved.
But
So,
what you want to do, but what you want to look at is SMR. They had earnings last night, and we put this on your guys' radar down here around 7 or 8. It's now 24.
yeah, absolute ripping. This is all-time highs. The thing I love about all-time highs, there's no bag holders, right? There's nobody out there who's been waiting 20 years to sell the stock or anything like that. It's just going. Uh, you don't need to even check on the sentiment because when something's at new all-time highs, the sentiment has to be good. And there's no one who can possibly be mad at SMR. A little bit of a short float. Do we think a lot of that covered or what? I'm seeing 25% of the short float. Do you think that's
I'm.
still hanging around?
I think a lot of that's. I think a lot of that has been worked off. Yeah.
You'd have to. What kind of crazy person is shorting into all-time highs and not getting blown out of the position? So it's really interesting too to see these guys move without the uranium moving. And what was it? CEG got slapped as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's still down. So I guess the news there we can go over. They were denied by some government agency the rights to buy. Basically, they wanted to buy like a certain amount of the nuclear power plant. They wanted to say, I want to reserve X amount of your output. So if you output, I don't know, I'm gonna some uh, electrician is just gonna kill me. But if you output, you know, a million gigajoules or what was it in uh, Back to the Future,
Gigawatts.
gigawatts or whatever,
1.1. No. 1.1 gigawatts.
1.1. So say they wanted half of that, right? They wanted to go to the power plant and said, I want to reserve half of that goes directly into our data center, screw everything. And the regulatory people were like, no, you can't. You can buy power from them, but you can't reserve power from them. So that made them gap down, but not nearly as much as they gapped up on the initial news, which I think is telling. Right, Steve, when you see a massive gap up because this thing is happening, and then they say no, it's not happening, and you only have a little bit of a gap down, I think that's the market basically saying, okay, but they're going to find a way. Right? They're going to figure this
Yeah.
out eventually. But
Yeah. Anytime you recover the day of earnings miss and start buying it back, just like SMR did today, just like PLTR did in the past,
you
that's a big shot across the bow that it's not going to be a normal miss. It's a perfect example of like letting the price action trump the headlines. Oh my God, they missed the gap down 6%. Bell rings 5%, 4%. It's
yeah.
like, oh, this is different. So just pay attention to that in the future.
Well, yeah, it's basic psychology. People are when something dips, all we're looking for is, are people excited that it dipped? Right? Are people looking at CEG saying, yes, I get to buy this thing, I missed the initial gap up. Now that it's down a bit, I get to buy it. Or are people saying, okay, now that it's gapping down, I'm selling? And in CEG's case, they're buying it. So one thing I did want to go over just right away, and I think is a good lesson for everybody, is the Sell the News event that we saw here after the election on DJT. I think, and me and Steve were talking about, I think this was pretty obvious. I think we talked about this before it happened, right? That when you have something like this that's purely driven as a emotional type vehicle, and people are using this as a way to bet, it's funny. The market knew the election outcome far before anything, which I think is very interesting going forward. I'm going to be really excited for like the betting markets. I don't know if you followed those, Steve's. The betting markets knew exactly what was going to happen like a month ago. And same with this stock, right? Ramping up into the election. And then all of a sudden it gaps up on the election, then just completely falls apart. It's down like 25,
Let me,
30% from there.
let me
Um,
talk about this because I was long and I've talked about this. I literally picked the bottom in DJT down there around 13, and I rode literally a 4 or 5 bagger. I sold a little bit, bought a little bit back, but I got up at 1:03 in the morning Pacific time. I missed it by 3 minutes. DJT literally was up to like 57 or 58 pre-market. It spiked up when it opened, and I'm just kicking myself for not having an order there. So I watched it, and I was kind of late to the realization that you probably should just take profits. So I eventually took profits, and it was just one of the greatest trades of the. It was the greatest trade of the year. I added them up,
yeah.
and then I've watched. And but guess what? I had an alert in today to buy at the 50 SMA. We didn't get down there. We spiked lower, and the sellers abated, and I bought some, and so I'm long again. Not as much as I was last time, but trade around. We've talked about the anatomy of a trade around. Here's a stock that is in motion. It's volatile. It's emotional.
Hmm.
We just had the sell-off, as Michael talked about, a gigantic sell-off from 57 pre-market, and we went down to 26, 90 this morning on the lows, reversed, and that's kind of what I was waiting for. So I was just kind of waiting in wait as a hunter, and didn't get the price I wanted, but I noticed, hey, it's starting to break back above. Let's jump back in. So I'm already, up a couple of points in this one. So having fun. This is a great market, and let's start talking about the election stocks in general.
Yeah.
Um, I actually took home a couple, and we'll start with our friend MindMed. Why
Oh,
did
my
we take home
friend.
MindMed? Well, you were already long MindMed,
Hmm.
and I decided prior to the election, I started thinking, and I told Michael this. I said, Robert F. Kennedy is going to be a big part. Junior is going to be a big part of this cabinet, and he is going to just reform the FDA and diet and big pharma and all this type of stuff. We're going to reverse course on all the naughty, bad stuff, in my opinion, that we've been doing, and it's time. Who are going to be the benefactors of something like that? Well, he literally said psychedelics. I don't know if you know that, Michael, but he's
Yeah, you sent
used the
me
word psycho.
a
Yeah,
tweet on it. Yeah.
it was a link or something, but it was a comment by the man who's about ready to be given the keys to reform our diet and our pharmaceutical health.
Hmm.
And that's no surprise, not only earnings, but there's no surprise that the stock has behaved like this post election. Everybody's seeing the same thing. So there's an election story. I took it before, and I'm happy I did. I've sold half at the AV while. We won't get into that, but I'm still long half, and I'm just loving it. It's probably going to become a trade around for me. The
Yeah.
next big pullback, I'll watch for 2 or 3 days of pullback. I'm going to jump back in more and go back to a full load. Bring up
Thing.
Kodak. I want to talk about. I'll go
Well,
finish your
no.
thought on this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just the thing about this one that I like is that there was CM Compass, CMPS.
Hmm.
The reason that I think this one's leading is that CMPS actually had not good data, not on their drug, but the fact that they couldn't find people to commit to the whole psychedelic thing, I think is a bad stigma. So, you're doing a study with the FDA, you have to have very specific people. Like you're looking for people that are diagnosed with massive depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Those people can't be on other drugs because then you don't know if it's your drug or their drug that worked. You're looking for a very specific kind of person, but you're also looking for a lot of them because if you're doing a study, you have to study a lot of people. And they couldn't find the amount of people to do this, and this is a UK based company. So MindMed on their earnings call yesterday, because as a shareholder, I was bored and I listened to it. They said they're not having that problem at all. Where they're operating in the States, they find that people are way more open to trying this study. So they're not having that problem. That caused this push. And then this
Mm.
massive short float, which is 40% of the float is short.
Yeah.
You've got to be, if you're short this right now and you've seen this move from $5 up to 9 in 3 days and half of the float is short, I'm really, really hoping for a short squeeze. If this gets to and through this $12, this high right here, I did a little cheeky technical analysis. I don't like doing this much with profit targets based off patterns, but this to me is looking like the chart's getting a little, do a weekly maybe. This to me is looking like a little bit of a cup and handle, right? You've got the big cup right here that's been going on for a long time, and you've got the handle right there.
It looks like a frying pan. It's a
It,
frying pan.
if you do the target, so the target for the cup and handle for those uninitiated is you take the bottom of the cup and you add it to the breakout point and that's your target. It's sitting $45 a share. Now, I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but let's just say if it does happen, I will be a very happy boy.
Well, when I just reminded myself of the short flow, it looks like it's been adjusted a little bit down too in our data, down to 37. That was just the icing on the cake when I was had my finger on the button. Do I want to take this before elections? Short, yes, I do. And that was just a nice catalyst.
Yeah.
Let's continue on because I took another
Kodak.
one home. It was Kodak, and this has
Oh,
always been kind of a stock that's been in a holding pattern. And I say that because this is an election stock because everybody go back and remember during COVID, at least in the United States, we had this crazy shortage of certain things like penicillin, antibiotics, chlorine. We had become reliant on
those are
all of these basic staple
very
chemicals
important
and,
things. Yeah.
and yeah, very important things, be it, just simple drugs that no longer are in patent. I forget what they call them.
Yeah.
But the point being is with Trump winning, he has dedicated and promised, and he always does what he's promising. We're going to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., and there's no reason, once again, to be dependent on foreign countries holding our critical chemicals and our pharmaceuticals. So Kodak just has always been in the back of my mind, and I took it before the election, and it looks like the same thing. It likes what it sees. It's recognizing that this is a giant company that is keyed and tooled and ready to retool or fine tune their tooling to make whatever's needed. Whether it's penicillin, chlorine, or anything that is in high demand, that we no longer can rely on the overseas countries holding us hostage or any sort of foreign type of disruption. So who knows what they're going to make, but I keep an eye on Kodak. Let me just say that keep an eye on them. You're probably going to see some headlines soon about what they're starting to retool and how they're going to
Mm.
benefit, or how we are going to benefit in this country from their domestic production.
And this, I think, is a good one to make a lesson on short float versus days to cover. And the more I look at days to cover, the more interesting it is. So, days to cover is essentially you take the amount of shares that are outstanding short, and you divide them by the average volume, right? So you can have something with a really high short float that actually has a really low days to cover because it's actively traded. Kodak only has about a 7% short float, but that's actually 8 days to cover. So what that number means is that based off Kodak's current volume, if the shorts want to get out of their position, that will take them 8 days of buying. If every trade was a buy to get out of the position, so start to look at that because sometimes a small short float can be deceiving. And actually, sometimes a large short float can be deceiving as well because that days to cover number is, I think, the most important because that will give more of a squeeze potential, right? So like with MindMed, it's 10 days to cover still, even with the inflated volume that's going on here. One thing I want to talk about that's obviously been a massive boom after the election is regional banks, so KRE. So I think the idea here, again, as someone doesn't live in your country and doesn't, I don't even follow my politics, let alone your guys. I think everybody's looking back to when Trump last time basically bullied JPOW into lowering interest rates. I'm sure you remember that, the back and forth on Twitter that basically I'm going to fire you if you don't drop the interest rates. The biggest benefactor of lower interest rates is these small banks, right? The ones that have a lot of debt, the large banks, not so much, right? Because they have a lot of cash, so they're making money off this. These small banks, if you guys remember when it looked like all the banks were going to go bankrupt when they started raising rates back in April. You had the regional banks like what First National, I don't remember. A lot of your banks, little guys, went under because they were raising rates so aggressively. I think that's what the market's seeing here. That uh, if he continues to do what he did before, which was slap JPOW until he lowers rates and turns back on the money printer, the regional banks are going to make a lot of money, and these things are really depressed. If we think about it, everything else is pretty much at all-time highs. Regional banks are nowhere near there. So might be a good one to pick up. These aren't things that I usually trade because they're usually not that interesting. However, this gap up was bigger than big tech. It was bigger than a lot of things. This gap up, and that actually leads to IWM. So small caps here, obviously the best winner of what's happening here. And the idea is This small cap index is a lot of regional banks, because in the States, I always have to remind myself, because we only have 6 banks up here, that you guys have a lot of little tiny banks, and that's a large part of the IWM. And also that lower interest rates are generally good for smaller companies. A big company like Apple, you jack the rates up 2 or 3%, they don't care. They've got a lot of cash, they don't have a lot of debt. If you're a small kind of mom and pop business and you're funding your operations off debt, dropping these interest rates is going to help as well. So I think that's what's going on with what's happening here with these. And it could also be the gold trade as well, right? Gold's starting to fall down a little bit. Because I think there's certainty. Again, as someone who has no dog in the fight, I think the market was just super excited that there was nothing was contested. It was a clear victory, fully. I remember hearing a lot of people. I was in Twitter Spaces and people preparing say, "Oh, we might not know for a number of days," and blah blah blah. The fact the market woke up the next day, it was very clear
Mandate.
it was over. They're like, okay, now we can make our bets. Small cap's going to be a big one. So I think so. Steve, what do you think about that? Because I think you're going to be very excited, as I am, because it's so much more fun to trade small caps than it is the large
Mhm.
guys.
Well, I love that's where I get most of my money. Most of my moves are in small caps. You know, Andy will be saying, "I'm buying Amazon." I'm like, "Cool."
Move a
That's
couple
not for
percent.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100 shares. The thing I wanted to mention also is there's some drama going on at the FOMC. I don't know if you saw this, but our new president, who, by the way, the market seems to embrace, has said Jay Powell will be fired. And somebody asked Jay Powell, "Will, if you were asked to step down and resign from Trump, will you?" And he said no. So there's already a bit of a little political drama
Hmm.
building over there, and that could create headlines in itself. So I'm just making people aware of that. That's what's happening out there.
What's the again? What's the rules there? Who
He
has
doesn't
that
have the
authority?
rules. I don't think he has that authority. He has, well, actually, he does. He has the. I did a GPT on it the other day. Who is responsible for? Uh, let's see. The chair is appointed by the president of the United States and must be confirmed by the Senate. The president also has the authority to designate a commissioner. So I don't think he can fire him. He can maybe appoint him, but the way these things work is they can make life difficult for you. That's how it
Yeah,
works
well,
on both sides.
what was
So
that? Do you ever watch Seinfeld? What was that Seinfeld episode where they wanted to fire George and he couldn't, so they just put him
yeah,
in a
yeah,
room and just
yeah,
said, "You
yeah.
sit in
He
that
just
room."
sat under his desk and yeah.
So there must be so basically what he's saying is if he can't fire him, he just waits for his term to be up and then he can replace him. Do you know when his term's up?
I don't, but I'm sure there's ways in which to, expedite things. It's kind of a vote of no confidence. It's a familiar term for you guys,
Yeah,
when the
that's how
president
we
says,
kick our guy
get
out.
out of here.
Yeah.
So there you go. We'll see what
Okay.
happens.
Well, that'll be interesting, but
Yeah.
I don't think the Fed matters too much anymore because they're very open about what they're going to do, that interest rates are going to be lower. I think our the last couple years we've just been watching the Fed like a hawk, saying, okay, when are you guys going to stop raising and start lowering? Now that I think that happened, unless inflation re-engages, I don't think people are going to care about. And we kind of saw that yesterday, right? We had the FOMC announcement, and nobody cared. Because it was 100%. I think it was 99.6% chance that people knew what they were going to do. But yeah, the Fed happened right here, and you can barely see the action. So I don't think people really are going to care that much anymore. But drama's drama. So we'll see about that. One thing I did want to look at too is Tesla. I don't think it's interesting because Tesla's moving, but if you look at the other EV makers, Rivian, what X
Remember, they're not just an EV maker anymore. They make
that's
AI
what
robots.
That's what I well, and I think this is more of a vote. I think this is
Personality
more
thing
of an
too.
Elon thing than this is actually
Yeah.
a Tesla thing. Now, full disclosure, I have a rotational strategy. I think I mentioned last time I was long Tesla and I didn't even know it. I just have a system that rotates into good trending large cap names. So I'm happy. But yeah, I think this is more of a vote of okay, right? Elon
The
helped
future.
Trump get elected, and now I think Trump said something about getting Elon into the cabinet in some way. And I just think it's one of those, I want my CEO to work inside the government. That's obviously a good thing. It means if there's any bills one way or another, he probably put his thumb on the scale, that kind of thing a little
He
bit.
definitely has an inside ear. I think that's what we're looking
Right.
at here. Yeah.
He can go and he can talk and he can say, yeah, you should do this for, getting getting my stuff off the ground, or help with this,
That are,
blockage or whatever it is that, yeah, start tariffing this country, and don't tariff me, that kind of stuff. But I just think that's part of it, right? If you have your CEO that's saying, hey, you're going to get into you can talk to the president whenever you want. Why wouldn't that be a good thing for your company, right? You'd be crazy to think
hey,
that's
you know
bad.
what? Guess what I did last night? I don't know. Remember the whole Dogecoin thing and Elon goofing with it and all
Yeah.
that? Isn't it weird how it's come full circle that he is now going to be the director of government efficiency, DOGE? And he keeps referring to his new title as the DOGE. Go ahead and pull up Doge. See what's happening over there. I bought some last night at 19 cents. I'm long Dogecoin. I can't believe it.
That's the Canadian USD 19. Yeah, that Canadian price can really screw you up. You got to be careful. The other day I looked at Bitcoin, and it
There you
showed
go. That's what I want to see right there.
$110,000. Yeah, so that's a nice push
Mhm.
up.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got a lot.
That's what's happening in Doge.
Yeah, that's a nice looking cup
So,
there as well.
yeah, yeah, I
So
bought
the
some.
real question is, when's the Doge ETF come out? What a
mm,
world that would be if you
I,
can
I,
trade Dogecoin via ETF. But that would be another thing to talk about, is because obviously, I think, again, I don't follow this, but Trump must have said something good about Bitcoin somewhere along the way, or one of
oh
his
yeah,
cabinet
yeah,
members
he has
did,
been.
because we finally got the all-time high breakout in Bitcoin. It's holding for now. I think that this is a pretty obvious play right now. If it holds this all-time high breakout, and can sustain that for, as long, if we go sideways, if we go up, everything's fine. If we fail, then maybe we need to look at it again. But it seems like a lot of the market was just waiting. They were just waiting for,
Hmm.
okay, let's get this resolved. Let's figure out who's sitting in the chair next, and then let's just start taking our shots. Now that that happened, the only loser I see, and I don't know what happened here. I don't know if, you know, Trump's anti-weed, or if it was just individual states. I heard that Florida, it had something to do with, they had to have
Well,
60% of the vote to legalize weed, and they had like 58, so they just missed it. But Moas is getting killed.
there's also the fact that the Democrats really made a lot of promises, like, "Hey, we'll just legalize this stuff, federal, get us in." It was one of their campaign promises, and so there might have been some euphoria and hype going into that. And so,
Mm.
like you said, that was a loser of the election because that's probably been cut in half. That's probably not going to happen. But who knows? You can still get it. I can pick up the phone and have it delivered to me easily.
Yeah, well, and again, the way I understand it down there, and you obviously correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's just up for each individual state to figure out
Yeah.
who allows it. Because, yeah, again, I
If
read an
you,
article that said Florida was like a percent
yeah.
away from legalizing it. So
Yeah, if you live in Boise, Idaho, it's a 30-minute drive to Spokane, Washington, and they take care of business that way.
yeah, well, it makes sense right now. Now, how much trouble is that, though, carrying that across state borders? Is that a
Uh, that's a whole other story. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to say anything.
yeah, I just don't. Again, in Canada, it's at our liquor store. You just go grab it. So it's just a little different here. But so yeah, and so I think the theme of this, and I think the thing to look at is, regardless of your thoughts on politics, if you're someone who is pro one party or pro the other party, or someone like me who doesn't care because I don't live there, um, I think stewing in your political victory, and you're very happy, or defeat and you're very sad, is just not the right move right now. I think you have a very short moment of time in which these trends are going to play out,
Yeah,
where you're going to have these institutions who, I guarantee you, the hedge funds don't care, right? The hedge funds have one job: it's to make good investments and make money. If you're mad that your guy didn't win, or if you're happy your guy win, nobody cares, right? This is the time, I think, to get to work. So take the weekend, go through and say, okay, this is where money looks like it's flowing into. This is where money is looking like it's flowing out of. Make your lists, set your price alerts, and get ready to go. Because that's personally what I'm doing this week. Is I'm just spending the whole time. The market has broken out to new all-time highs. It's making right. It's making new all-time highs as we're recording this. And generally speaking, this isn't a bearish thing. So I'm doing just what I talked about. I'm making lists of everything that did amazingly this week based off the news, everything that did poorly based off the news, and I'm setting price alerts for pullbacks or to watch lists to see if they rest. And then if we break out, we make new highs, or we get those pullbacks I want to have that list because I think you've got couple weeks, maybe a month of the institutions now taking their bets and that pushing things in certain directions. And then everyone will forget about politics and we'll all be focused on whatever the next thing is. So kind of it's one of those make hay while the sun shine moments, I think.
Yep. Good point. Good way to end it.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I know last week you were a little under the weather. I know you saw the comments. A lot of people giving you well wishes there, which were good. But he's back. He's alive. It didn't kill him, so it
Yeah.
probably made him stronger. And I'll see you guys next week.
Sounds good. See ya.